Okay, what's on my mind this morning? President and CEO of Scotiabank, David Noel, was on yesterday with you and Dennis Patriarche. You guys know he's also president of the Jamaica Bankers Association, so he speaks not just for Scotia, but for the wider banking community. And for the past 24 hours, almost, since that interview took place, I've been thinking about something that he said. I just can't get it out of my mind. So you guys were discussing the Bank of Jamaica's move to reduce the cash reserve requirement. And listeners, the cash reserve is the amount of money that deposit taking institutions are required to hold at the BOJ. So effective June 3, it's being reduced from 9% to 7%. And what that's going to do is it will free up more than $12 billion for banks and other financial institutions to lend to businesses and households, hopefully at lower rates and on better terms. That's the intention. So Mr. Noel was making the point that this is going to have a really significant impact. He said banks are going to have to get more competitive because they'll have all this extra cash lying around that they have to lend because it doesn't benefit them to do nothing with it. They're not content like some people to leave their money under a mattress, or even in a savings account bearing nearly zero interest and not touching it for 30 years. Because banks make money by investing money, and they invest it by lending it to customers and charging them interest. So giving them back more money, giving the banks back more money is supposed to increase lending, and they'll have to find more ways to get creative and attract new customers. And the whole rationale behind this is to get the economy to grow. The whole reason they're doing all of this is to get the economy to grow, and also right now to boost inflation, which the technocrats say is too low. And the point of boosting that as well is also to get the economy to grow. So the theory is that by getting the banks to lend more, this will result in more productive activity, thereby resulting in growth. But the thing that David Noel said that struck me is this. He says, yes, Jamaicans are now borrowing at unprecedented low interest rates. So the interest rates are coming down. But he said, not everybody is benefiting.
Our best customers who have a long track record with a bank, individuals who clear stream of income that's predictable, that's reliable, they can now borrow at unprecedented low rates in the 6 to 7% range for mortgages, and businesses borrowing at 5 or lower. The challenge is that a lot of our small businesses, medium-sized businesses, are borrowing at much, much higher rates because of the lack of formality, because of the high delinquency rates in some of those segments. So you could have rates being very low, but if the entire sector can't access those low rates, then you're not going to achieve the type of growth that you want to see.
Exactly. So not everybody is accessing those low rates. And he also made the point that Jamaica's real growth potential will only be unlocked when more people have access to financial services.
Big challenge we have is financial inclusion. Even though you see credit expanding and rates coming down, it's a relatively small section of the Jamaican public that's actually benefiting. Only about 30% of our society is in the formal banking sector, and of that, not all of those customers borrow. Our challenge is how do we expand the number of people who have access to financial services? That's where all the efforts around financial inclusion, things such as the efforts into having a national ID, simplifying the processes for people to just open a bank account or deal with a government agency. That's where I think the real potential to see Jamaica grow economically will come from.
So you heard what he said? Among other things, only 30% of Jamaicans have a bank account. And of that number, not all of them borrow. So all these moves that the BOJ is taking, reducing the cash reserve requirement, lowering their policy rate to now just 1.25%, that's only having an impact on a fraction of the population. So you start with the 30% that actually have a bank account. And then you subtract those who don't borrow, who don't access credit. And then you subtract those who do borrow, but don't qualify for the low rates, the less than 7% mortgage or the less than 5% business loan. And what are you left with? See, I don't even know, but my guess would be somewhere around 5 to 10% of the people who are actually benefiting from these moves, 10% being a very high estimate in my opinion. So you have at least 90% of the population not benefiting at all from any of these measures that the BOJ has been taking. And then we sit down and we wonder, why isn't it working? Why isn't it? We're not seeing the numbers that we want to see. It's not working. Well, it's not working because 90% of the people aren't benefiting from the things that you're doing. This is why quarter after quarter, month after month, at least for the past 4 months, we're still not seeing inflation being where we want it to be. And for the past many years, we're not seeing growth where we want it to be. Now, granted, there are signs that we're doing better than we used to do, which is great, but coming from basically zero, I mean, the baseline was low to begin with. So anything better than zero, we celebrate, right? It's like, Patria, remember when you're in, well, maybe not you because you're bright, right? But remember when you're in school and you bring home like 60% on a test and your mother chastises you for it? 60%, Patria, okay, I know you can do better than that. And I said, but mommy, everybody else get 40. So the baseline was low. Being the best of a bad pool or being better than terrible isn't necessarily something to celebrate. So we've got to do better, a whole lot better. The efforts to increase financial inclusion need to be doubled and tripled and quadrupled and then quadrupled again. What's that? Sextupled? Octupled?
Oliver call it football.
Probably. And when you look at the reasons that some people aren't a part of the formal system, those reasons vary from simply they don't have any form of valid identification. And then you have those who don't trust the banks and to a lesser extent the credit unions. Trust is another issue. And then, of course, you have those who deliberately avoid the formal system for nefarious reasons. But in this range of reasons, the identification issue is a low-hanging fruit. Just get people IDs. And who would have thought that something that seems so simple would end up taking decades and all now can't be done. So we need to get the ball rolling on NIDS urgently. Now, with the court's decision, the government needs to urgently redraft that legislation to make it something that is constitutional, that is legal, because it has immediate implications for the country's growth. If all of your people can't participate in formal services, what does that leave you with? And we also have to find more creative ways of reaching people, of earning their trust and bringing them into the system. And this move by the government to get people to invest in something like a Wigton is a great start. We now have 31,000 Jamaicans owning shares in Wigton, and many of these are brand new investors. I saw them in the lines at the investment agencies. Many of these are people investing for the very first time, opening an investment account for the very first time, some of them even opening a bank account for the very first time because they're motivated by this prospect. And then on the nefarious side, on those who avoid the formal system for nefarious reasons, we need to strengthen our methods of targeting those too, because crime isn't just murder and shooting. It's the proceeds of crime where we can possibly make the biggest impact. The money laundering, the large cash transactions. So we need to strongly enforce POCA. We need to follow the money and force the criminals to abandon those trades and thereby motivate the young potential criminals to turn to more legitimate forms of business before they get into that system and become functional, contributing members of society. That's what's on my mind.